Have you ever witnessed nature's most unlikely alliance form in the face of tragedy? When wildlife researcher Dr. Elena Rodriguez discovered a baby gorilla dying in a massive python's crushing coils, she thought her desperate rescue attempt would be the end of the story. But what happened when a pride of lions witnessed her heroic intervention? Their response to seeing a human save a gorilla was so unthinkable, so beyond every law of the wild, that it redefined our understanding of animal consciousness forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The Mahale Research Station sits perched on the shores of Lake Tanganyika in western Tanzania, where ancient forested mountains cascade down to pristine waters that stretch beyond the horizon like an inland sea. This remote corner of East Africa represents one of the continent's last remaining fragments of undisturbed wilderness, where chimpanzees swing through primary forest canopies while lions patrol the savanna grasslands just kilometers away, creating an ecosystem so diverse it defies traditional ecological boundaries. Massive miombo trees tower above a complex understory where mountain streams create natural corridors between different habitat zones, allowing species from vastly different environments to cross paths in ways rarely seen elsewhere in Africa. The research station's elevated platforms and hidden observation blinds enable scientists to study wildlife behavior without disturbing the intricate relationships that have evolved over millennia in this pristine sanctuary. This isn't your typical conservation story about human intervention and wildlife rescue. What you're about to witness transcends every assumption about territorial boundaries, species loyalty, and the capacity for recognition that exists between natural enemies. It's not about research protocols or scientific observation. It's about something far more profound that emerges when witness to courage transcends every barrier that evolution has created between predator and prey. The unique geography of Mahale creates unprecedented encounters, where mountain-dwelling primates descend to lakeshores frequented by savanna predators, forcing adaptations and interactions that challenge every rule of wildlife behavior. During the dry season, when water sources become scarce, these territorial overlaps create a stage where the impossible becomes routine. On this particular morning, as mist rose from the warm lake waters and filtered sunlight painted the forest in shades of emerald and gold, destiny was preparing to test the boundaries of interspecies understanding in ways that would forever change how we perceive the emotional intelligence of Africa's most iconic predators. What began as routine field research would become a testament to the unthinkable depths of animal consciousness and the recognition of heroism that apparently knows no species boundaries. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had dedicated 12 years of her life to studying the complex social behaviors of Mahale's chimpanzee communities, her research contributing crucial insights into primate intelligence and emotional development. The 38-year-old primatologist possessed an unusual combination of scientific rigor and intuitive understanding that had earned her legendary status among field researchers. Her weathered hands bore the scars of countless encounters with thorns and defensive animals, while her compassionate brown eyes reflected the deep respect that came from years of intimate observation of our closest evolutionary relatives. Elena's ability to remain motionless for hours, reading the subtle communications and social dynamics of primate families, had developed within her an almost supernatural sensitivity to distress calls that transcended species boundaries. Her fluency in chimpanzee vocalizations had earned the trust of several family groups, making her one of the few humans who could move through their territory without causing alarm or disruption. In the forested slopes above the research station lived little Kisi, a 6-month-old mountain gorilla whose presence in chimpanzee territory represented one of conservation's most remarkable discoveries. The orphaned infant had somehow survived the journey from his original habitat hundreds of kilometers away, likely following river corridors during seasonal floods that had displaced numerous wildlife populations. Kisi's golden-brown fur and bright eyes sparkled with the kind of innocent curiosity that made him beloved by researchers, though his vulnerability in this alien environment created constant anxiety among those who had taken responsibility for his welfare. The young gorilla's playful nature and fearless exploration often led him into dangerous situations that his species' normal family structure would have prevented. Several kilometers away, in the savanna grasslands where forest met open plain, lived Django's pride, a family of lions whose territorial range included the unusual boundary zone between mountain forest and lakeside plains. Django, the magnificent patriarch, led his family with the wisdom of a ruler who had successfully adapted to terrain that challenged every instinct his species had evolved over millennia. His intelligent amber eyes and battle-scarred mane spoke to years of protecting those he loved in an environment where survival required constant vigilance. The first warning came as a subtle shift in the forest's natural symphony that Elena's trained ears detected while she was documenting chimpanzee feeding behaviors near a mountain stream. The familiar chorus of morning sounds, the melodic calls of various bird species, the constant chatter of colobus monkeys, and the gentle rustle of leaves began to fragment in a pattern she had learned to associate with the presence of large predators moving through the territory. Elena slowly lowered her observation notebook, her researcher's instincts immediately recognizing the environmental cues that preceded dangerous encounters in the wild. Through years of fieldwork, she had developed an almost supernatural ability to read the forest's moods, understanding that the sudden silence spreading through the canopy spoke to threats that demanded immediate attention and caution. The chimpanzee family she had been observing showed their own awareness of the growing tension, their relaxed, foraging behavior shifting to the hyper-vigilant alertness that came from generations of avoiding predators. Their soft hooting calls carried warning notes that made every member of the troop immediately scan the surrounding vegetation for signs of danger. Meanwhile, little Kesey's innocent exploration had led him away from the relative safety of the established research area toward the stream corridors that connected forest to lakeside grasslands. The young gorilla's natural curiosity about the colorful butterflies and interesting rock formations near the water had drawn him into the dangerous boundary zone where different ecosystems converged, and predators from multiple habitats could overlap. From her concealed observation position, Elena caught glimpses of movement in the dense riverside vegetation that made her blood run cold. Her telephoto lens revealed the unmistakable diamond patterns and massive girth of an African rock python, easily 25 feet in length, using the stream's natural cover to approach something or someone, with the calculated patience of an apex predator that had perfected its hunting techniques over decades of successful kills. The convergence was inevitable and terrifying. Kesey's playful investigation of the stream bank was carrying him directly into the path of one of Africa's most formidable constrictors, while his isolated position made any rescue attempt exponentially more dangerous. What erupted from the stream's shadowy depths was a nightmare of scales and crushing power that transformed Elena's peaceful morning into a life-and-death crisis. The massive African rock python that emerged from the water moved with the fluid precision of millions of years of evolutionary perfection, its enormous head larger than a basketball, and jaws capable of dislocating to swallow prey many times Kesey's size. 25 feet of pure predatory muscle uncoiled from the stream's concealment with devastating speed. The attack was swift and calculated with terrifying efficiency. Little Kesey, caught completely off guard while investigating a cluster of colorful pebbles at the water's edge, had no time to react before powerful coils wrapped around his small form with the inexorable force of a living vice. The young gorilla's scream of terror pierced the forest air, a sound so heartbreaking it seemed to shatter the very soul of the ancient woodland. The python's strategy was diabolical in its calculated cruelty. Instead of attempting to drag Kesey into deeper water where he might drown quickly, the serpent positioned itself in the stream's shallows where the struggle would be visible and audible to any potential witnesses. Each of the gorilla's desperate movements only seemed to trigger the python's tightening response, the massive coils contracting with methodical precision that spoke to countless similar victories. Kesey's small hands grasped frantically at the python's smooth scales, finding no purchase against the relentless pressure that was systematically crushing the air from his lungs. His bright eyes, which moments before had sparkled with innocent curiosity, now reflected the approaching darkness of unconsciousness as the serpent's embrace eliminated his ability to breathe or call for help. From her observation position, Elena watched in horror as the gentle creature she had grown to love during his months at the research station was methodically killed by one of nature's most efficient predators. The python's cold intelligence was evident in every movement. This wasn't random predation, but a calculated execution by an apex predator that had chosen its victim with deadly precision. The forest that had seemed so peaceful moments before now echoed with sounds of struggle and approaching death. Elena's response to witnessing Kesey's mortal peril revealed the profound internal battle raging between her scientific training and her human compassion. Every protocol she had ever learned screamed that intervention in natural predator-prey interactions was forbidden, potentially disrupting evolutionary processes that had shaped these forests for millennia. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Yet, as she watched the orphan gorilla who had become like family to the research team being systematically crushed to death, something deeper than professional objectivity began to override her training. The primatologist's hands trembled as she calculated distances and escape routes, her mind racing through tactical assessments that had nothing to do with scientific observation and everything to do with desperate rescue planning. Her years of studying animal behavior had created emotional bonds with her subjects that transcended professional boundaries, making Kizi's terror feel like a personal crisis rather than a research opportunity. The chimpanzee family she had been observing showed their own distress at the sounds of Kizi's struggle. These intelligent primates, who recognized the young gorilla as a fellow member of the greater ape family, began vocalizing in patterns that spoke to genuine anguish. Their hooting calls seemed designed to offer comfort across species boundaries, creating a chorus of support that couldn't provide physical assistance but acknowledged the tragedy unfolding before them. From the forest edges, other wildlife began gathering in response to the crisis. The same creatures that had fled at the first sign of python activity now seemed drawn back by an instinctive understanding that they were witnessing something that demanded attention. Colobus monkeys positioned themselves in nearby trees, their normally playful chatter replaced by mournful calls that seemed to mourn Kizi's approaching death. But it was Elena's decision that would determine the outcome of this impossible situation. The researcher found herself abandoning every safety protocol as she began moving toward the stream, driven by emotions that had nothing to do with science, and everything to do with the kind of moral courage that emerges when witness to suffering becomes unbearable. Her movement toward the python attack would set in motion a chain of events that would challenge every assumption about interspecies recognition and response. Elena's approach to the python attack was a calculated gamble that violated every safety protocol in her field research manual. The primatologist moved through the forest understory with the stealth that 12 years of wildlife observation had taught her, each step carefully placed to avoid alerting the serpent to her presence until she could position herself for maximum intervention effectiveness. Her improvised weapon, a sturdy branch nearly 5 feet in length, felt pathetically inadequate against a predator of such massive proportions. What made Elena's strategy extraordinary was her apparent understanding of python behavior gained through years of studying predator-prey interactions. Instead of the direct confrontation that might trigger the snake's killing response, she maneuvered to approach from the serpent's blind spot, using the stream's natural features and vegetation to mask her advance until the critical moment. But Elena's desperate rescue attempt had not gone unnoticed by other observers. From the savanna grasslands beyond the forest edge, Django's pride had been drawn to the area by the unusual sounds of distress echoing from the woodland streams. The lion's presence in this boundary zone was unprecedented. These apex predators typically avoided the dense forest areas where their hunting advantages were negated by thick vegetation and limited maneuverability. Django's intelligent amber eyes tracked the unfolding drama with the analytical precision of a predator assessing complex prey dynamics. But what was happening before him defied every category of behavior his evolutionary experience had prepared him to understand. A human was actively engaging with a python to save a gorilla, 3 species that had no natural alliance or territorial overlap, yet were somehow converging in a life-and-death struggle that challenged his comprehension. The pride's reaction was unprecedented in wildlife behavior research. Instead of treating this crisis as an opportunity for scavenging or territorial expansion, the lions positioned themselves as observers, their body language suggesting not hunger or aggression, but something that could only be described as fascination. Their collective attention focused on Elena's heroic intervention, with an intensity that suggested they understood they were witnessing something historic, a moment when the boundaries between species would be tested in ways that transcended natural law. Elena's assault on the python was a desperate gamble that transformed the peaceful stream into a battlefield where human determination met reptilian fury. The primatologist's approach had been silent and calculated, but her initial strike with the makeshift club was thunderous, the hardwood branch connecting with the serpent's massive head with a sound that echoed through the forest like a gunshot. The impact sent shockwaves through both combatants as Elena committed herself to a confrontation that would either save Kisi's life or claim her own. The python's reaction was immediate and terrifying. The massive serpent, startled by this unprecedented attack, momentarily loosened its grip on little Kisi to assess this new threat that had materialized from nowhere. But the snake's defensive response revealed the intelligence that made these predators so formidable. Instead of releasing its prey entirely, it maintained enough coils around the young gorilla to use him as leverage, while directing its primary attention toward Elena. What followed was the most extraordinary display of human courage ever witnessed by the wildlife observers positioned around the stream. Elena's battle strategy revealed a deep understanding of python anatomy and behavior that went far beyond textbook knowledge. Her strikes were precisely targeted at pressure points, where she could disrupt the serpent's constricting ability without triggering its most dangerous defensive responses. But it was the lion's reaction that elevated this rescue attempt into something truly unprecedented. Instead of fleeing from the chaos or attempting to exploit the distraction for their own benefit, Django's pride began moving closer to the confrontation with what could only be described as protective intent. Their vocalizations shifted from the typical territorial calls associated with hunting to something entirely new, sounds that seemed designed to encourage rather than intimidate. The most remarkable moment came when Django himself began approaching the stream with deliberate steps that spoke to calculated decision-making rather than predatory opportunism. The magnificent lion's presence added a new dimension to the already impossible scenario, creating a convergence of species that challenged every assumption about natural boundaries and territorial behavior in ways that would redefine wildlife research forever. The battle reached its crescendo when Elena managed to create enough disruption in the python's grip for little Kisi to draw his first full breath in several terrifying minutes. But her exhaustion was becoming evident as the serpent's superior strength began to overwhelm her desperate efforts. The massive snake, recognizing that this human posed a genuine threat to its meal, began repositioning its coils to include Elena in its crushing embrace, a tactical shift that would likely result in 2 victims instead of 1. It was in this moment of apparent defeat that something absolutely unthinkable occurred. Django, who had been observing the struggle with increasing intensity, made a decision that shattered every law of predator behavior ever documented. The magnificent lion entered the stream with deliberate purpose, his powerful frame moving through the water toward the python, with what could only be described as rescue intent. What happened next defied every assumption about territorial boundaries and species recognition. Instead of attacking the python as a competitor or threat, Django positioned himself to assist Elena's rescue efforts, his massive paws finding purchase on sections of the serpent's body that allowed him to apply leverage and coordination with the human's efforts. The lion's actions suggested not just intelligence, but an understanding of cooperative strategy that transcended every boundary between species. The python, faced with this unprecedented alliance between natural enemies, found its tactical advantage completely eliminated. The combination of Elena's precise strikes and Django's overwhelming physical power created a coordinated assault that the serpent's evolutionary experience had never prepared it to counter. The snake's survival instincts, honed over millions of years, finally recognized when retreat offered better odds than persistence. But perhaps the most extraordinary aspect of this climactic moment was the way Django's entire pride joined the intervention. One by one, the other lions entered the stream, forming a protective circle around Elena and Kisi that spoke to recognition of heroism that apparently transcended species boundaries. Their collective presence transformed what had begun as a desperate rescue attempt into something that resembled a formal alliance between natural enemies united by a common cause. The python's retreat was as calculated as its initial attack had been, the massive serpent recognizing that this unprecedented coalition of rescuers had transformed a simple hunt into something far too costly to continue. With fluid grace that belied the violence of the previous moments, the snake disengaged from both its prey and its attackers, disappearing into the deeper sections of the stream where it could reassess this encounter that defied every pattern in its evolutionary experience. As the last ripples of the python's departure settled across the water's surface, an extraordinary scene unfolded that would challenge every assumption about interspecies relationships. Elena, exhausted from her desperate battle, found herself cradling little Kisi in the shallow water, while surrounded by a pride of lions who showed no aggression, no territorial defensiveness, only what could be described as protective concern for both human and gorilla. Django's approach to Elena was perhaps the most remarkable moment in wildlife behavior ever documented. The magnificent lion moved with deliberate gentleness, his massive head lowering toward the primatologist in what could only be interpreted as acknowledgement of her courage. When he touched his nose to her shoulder in a gesture that transcended every boundary between predator and prey, Elena understood that she had witnessed something that redefined the very nature of consciousness in the animal kingdom. Little Kisai's recovery was aided not just by Elena's medical knowledge, but by the unexpected protection offered by his unlikely guardians. The lions positioned themselves in a defensive formation around the rescued gorilla, their presence ensuring that no other predators would dare approach while he regained his strength. Their vocalizations had shifted to sounds that seemed designed to comfort rather than intimidate. The most unthinkable aspect of the entire encounter was what happened over the following hours. Instead of returning to their normal hunting patterns, the pride remained with Elena and Cassie until research station personnel could arrive with proper medical equipment. Their vigil represented a level of interspecies cooperation that challenged fundamental assumptions about territorial behavior, recognition of heroism, and the capacity for gratitude that apparently existed even among nature's most formidable predators. The story of Elena's heroic rescue and the lion's unthinkable response became a cornerstone in wildlife behavior research, fundamentally challenging every assumption about the emotional capacity and recognition abilities of apex predators. Footage from the Mahale Research Station security cameras captured every moment of this unprecedented alliance, providing evidence that rewrote textbooks on interspecies cooperation and animal consciousness. The most profound impact wasn't on academic circles but on conservation philosophy worldwide. The incident proved that recognition of courage, gratitude for heroism, and the capacity for cooperative behavior existed far beyond the boundaries that science had traditionally drawn around different species. Django's pride had demonstrated that consciousness, empathy, and moral recognition were not uniquely human traits, but universal qualities that connected all intelligent life. Wildlife rehabilitation centers began incorporating new protocols based on the Mahale model, recognizing that animals possessed emotional intelligence sophisticated enough to distinguish between threat and protection, enemy and ally. The lion's ability to recognize Elena's heroic intent and respond with protective cooperation suggested depths of understanding that challenged fundamental assumptions about predator psychology. Most remarkably, the relationship between Elena, Kizi, and Django's pride continued long after that fateful day. The lions would often appear near the research station when Elena was working in their territory, their presence serving as protection rather than threat. Little Kessie grew into a strong young gorilla under this unprecedented multi-species guardianship, his survival representing a living testament to the power of courage to transcend natural boundaries. Their story reminds us that heroism is a universal language, recognized and honored even by those we consider our natural enemies. In the forests of Mahale, where impossible alliances formed in moments of crisis, their legacy continues to inspire new understanding of what it means to be conscious, compassionate beings sharing this extraordinary world. The unthinkable had become undeniable. Love, courage, and recognition of nobility exist throughout the natural world, waiting to emerge when circumstances demand that we look beyond the boundaries that seem to divide us. Okay, up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.